I want you to know that tomorrow is her birthday.
Oh.
And so she doesn't know this, but I've actually written a poem for her, and I'm going to introduce her to you by sharing my poem with you, and with her for the first time.
You ready, Mom?
Oh my God.
Right. Okay. So, you really ought to meet my mother. No, I'm serious. You ought to meet my mother because in my lifetime, she has went from welfare to millionaire to fully aware. Because she loves children and the community so fiercely, does her absolute best to ensure that the voiceless others get heard, and she's woven her passions of education, spirituality, and community leadership into a doctorate at the age of 58, and then at 70, in her 70s, she turned that immense love onto herself, this generous listening and passion, and became even more fabulous. Really, you ought to meet my mother, because she says things like, there's always a way. She says things like, this is hard for me, but I need to say it. And she says things like, life begins at 40. She was right. You really ought to meet my mother, because she wrapped poverty in a mixture of fairy tales and realism, making the tooth fairy too afraid of our new puppy's barking to leave a quarter under the pillow. She believes there's always a way, and because she believes this, now she stands in the possibility of greatness in each person she meets, constantly inviting, nudging, encouraging, and sometimes even shoving us towards our greatness. You really ought to meet my mother, because she's birthed 3 daughters who live in the world wholeheartedly, and each of their unique worlds love them back. Because she is the best kind of city farmer, she cultivates neighborhood soil. She plants seeds of possibility in each person she meets, and then grows leaders with passion, purpose, and commitment to the community. You really ought to meet my mother, because she has served on numerous boards. She's received countless awards. She, as a teacher, was fully adored, and of course for the libations she's poured. You really ought to meet my mother, because her laughter will reach across a crowded room, tap you on the shoulder, and invite you in. Because her voice wraps you in ribbons of soft silk attention, which flashes of spark and passion. You really ought to meet my mother, because her eyes have cried oceans of tears for me, so that I could glide a little more gently through the rapids of life. Now her eyes see clearly through whirlpools of people's strife, plucking them with words of wisdom from eddies of thought. You really ought to meet my mother, because her hands have typed memos, cleaned floors, sewn dresses and shirts, cooked food, slammed doors, wiped noses, carried me, prayed for me, and let me go more often than she really wanted to. You really ought to meet my mother. Now her hands are free to embrace love and life, fully applauding her own leaps of faith. Honestly, you ought to meet my mother, because her hair changes with her identity. From pressed to relaxers, to wigs, to full-size afro, to jerry curl, and then back to perms, and then finally she just cut it all off so she could be short, free, and naturally herself. You really ought to meet my mother, because her ears could hear lies before I opened my mouth, hear sickness in my first breath, and had endless space for stories about my day. And now her ears hear faint hopes and wishes of souls longing to love, be loved, belong, and be of good use. Each story she shares from her life reaches toward your light and fans the flame of your phenomenal brilliance. You really ought to meet my mother. Her shoulders carry pain gracefully and truth boldly, and linked arms strategically with others, so that More boulders and burdens can be rolled away. Her back is strong, so she has yours. Her feet are rooted, so she will not waver. Her hips are sassy, so watch out for sparks. And her belly is alive and knows how to thrive. Her crown is wide open with direct connection to the divine. You really ought to meet my mother, because whether you know it or not, she has marched for you. She has stood for you. She has fought for you and dreamed of you long before you arrived. But most of all, her heart is even bigger than she is, as at 5'4", reaching around the world, meeting strangers with grace and finding shared humanity in a smile. Really, you ought to meet my mother, Jeanette Mitchell.